I think it's the unwritten rule of the internet that any self-respecting nerd with a YouTube channel and admiration for Toby Fox's work needs to make an analysis of Undertale or Deltarune's soundtrack at some point in their life. So naturally, this is mine. My particular interest is in the most common and least talked about leitmotif in Deltarune, the Don't Forget leitmotif. I honestly find it to be rather surprising that the only stuff I've seen for it is theories about who's singing the song and breakdowns of where the leitmotif shows up, despite how frequently it appears in the soundtrack. For reference, the Freedom leitmotif appears in 4 songs, Queen's leitmotif appears in 9 songs, and the Don't Forget leitmotif shows up in 15 songs. With the songs the leitmotif shows up in ranging from You Can Always Come Home, to The Dark Truth, to The World Revolving, I think that the leitmotif should be picked apart a bit more than just surface level recognition for the fact that it exists. It's about time I used the 1.5 years worth of music analysis I half paid attention to in choir class during sophomore year for something. So it may as well be for this. Alright, enough monologuing. Time to see where this leitmotif occurs anyways. 2 songs into the soundtrack and the motif already appears. Wowza. Really subtle, Toby. 7 seconds into the track beginning, the first part of Don't Forget is quoted. 10 seconds later, the main leitmotif appears and repeats itself a couple times before leaving just as soon as it came. Something interesting to note is that beginning also quotes the ending part of Once Upon a Time from Undertale. Paired with the fact that this is played off as an introduction to the setting and the characters, it's safe to say that the leitmotif here also serves as an intro into it being used as a reoccurring motif in the soundtrack. Nothing too crazy starting off. The very next track features the leitmotif around the halfway mark of the song. While it's less obvious than the beginning, it's still pretty noticeable. Interestingly enough, the scrap version of School, which Toby Fox talked about in his Undertale 6th anniversary stream, was essentially a different arrangement of Don't Forget. I find it quite intriguing that he has the leitmotif featured so heavily in this track, which means it might indicate a more important meaning than just your average reinforcement that this leitmotif is the theme of the game. Also worth noting is the inclusion of the hometown leitmotif in this track. The leitmotif is only in a small handful of songs from the Light World, but it's always paired with the Don't Forget leitmotif, so keep your eye out for it in future songs. We are now into the Dark World tracks! Yay! Even though I introduced the hometown leitmotif in the last section, we get to take a little break from it now. A little under a minute into the Field of Hopes and Dreams, the leitmotif appears and it just kind of pops in and out for the rest of the runtime. The leitmotif's inclusion in the song makes a good amount of sense given that the song occurs early in your journey through the Dark World and that the song is generally positive and cheerful. I mean, the title is The Field of Hopes and Dreams, after all. The thematic similarities between this track and the leitmotif are practically a circle, so the leitmotif here is pretty fitting. These next 3 songs are curious. They're surprisingly similar to each other, so I'll just talk about them all in this section. All 3 have, of course, the Don't Forget leitmotif, but another one as well, which is Gaster's theme. Yes, I know that bringing Gaster into the equation makes me run the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, jumping off into the deep end in the waters of speculation, but I promise that's not what I'm here to do. I'm going off as much factual evidence as I have at my disposal, and I will only dip my toe into speculation when needed. Please bear with me, and don't click off. Still here? Excellent. If you're curious as to where his leitmotif shows up in these songs, and maybe even the rest of the Deltarune soundtrack, I highly recommend Andrew Cunningham's video over it. It's super well edited and it has a lot of great information, so I'll link his video in the description since he does a lot better job explaining the leitmotif than I ever could. Anyways, going in chronological order, the Scarlet Forest only features the Don't Forget leitmotif in the last 10 seconds of the song and actually emphasizes Gaster's leitmotif over Don't Forget. In most tracks, the Don't Forget leitmotif is in, it tends to overshadow the other leitmotifs, which allows it to stand out, making this a very, very interesting case. Since the 2 themes are paired together in this track, it's very possible there is a connection between them. The only sort of overlap these 2 may have is the mysterious man behind the tree found in A Room Between Rooms in the Scarlet Forest. There is a chance that this implies that he is with us in the dark, but considering that the Don't Forget Leitmotif does not show up in the song that plays in that area, man.ogg, that is rather unlikely. I could just be overthinking it, and the Scarlet Forest track might just be a reinforcement of the leitmotif. Who knows? Next we have The World Revolving. Oh boy. Despite not even being 2 minutes long, the song manages to have the quote-unquote freedom theme, which is just a remixed version of Gaster's themes, a shit ton of other Gaster's themes quotes, independent of the freedom theme, and the Don't Forget leitmotif on repeat for the last 20 seconds of the song. Toby, why? Originally, this section was going to be about how there is a connection between the themes of freedom and friendship due to the two leitmotifs hanging out a bunch, but my argument unfortunately fell apart because there's just no Don't Forget quotes in Big Shot, which kind of obliterates any potential patterns. So I don't really have much for this section, unfortunately. Devil doesn't seem to be the type to stand by our side when the going gets tough, but just maybe it's Gaster being an ever-lurking force? I'm not quite sure. The only explanation that doesn't involve a massive amount of speculation and insane amounts of Gaster is that it's just a reinforcement of the leitmotif here, which is rather boring, I will admit, but it's on the safer side. Perhaps once more chapters get released, the leitmotif will make more sense here. But until then, I'm sticking with it being a leitmotif reinforcer since it's the easiest explanation. Occam's razor and all that. Friendship is thankfully one of the easiest songs to find the meaning of, but it still maintains an air of mystery due to Gaster's theme appearing in the bassline of the song. This track is essentially a different arrangement of Don't Forget, so it's easy to say that the theme of this song, so to speak, is literally friendship, which makes sense when you hear the actual lyrics for Don't Forget later. Your friends are with you in the dark, and when things get tough. That's what friends are for. Hooray. Like my point from The World Revolving, maybe Gaster is always lurking, and it could show some connection between the Fun Gang and Gaster, or Gaster just wants friends? You never know. This track is just the leitmotif played on electric guitar. It's not special on its own, besides being the first of 4 tracks in a row with this leitmotif, but when put in context, this actually puts us one step closer to understanding the leitmotif as a whole, interestingly enough. I have more thoughts about this that are best saved for later in the video. Yeah, sorry, we're gonna have to skip over this one for now. Welcome back to the Light World, and by extension, the hometown leitmotif. Yep, it's back. Like school, this song has 2 leitmotifs, with one being more prioritized, etc., etc. You already watched the school segment, so I'm not going to go over it again. It's essentially the same thing, but in a different song. You get the picture. This song is actually one of my favorites from the soundtrack. It's really calm and reassuring, since it's home from Undertale, but a more complete, full version with Don't Forget filling in the quiet spaces that the original one had. Thematically, this song works really well. When you're in a tough place, you can always count on your friends, and you can always come home. This is the leitmotif, but with lyrics, and the reference point for all my other ramblings. Not much to say here, other than it gives some context to the leitmotif, since this song actually has lyrics, which makes the meaning of the motif. God, I have got to stop using motif and leitmotif to death, but there are not many better words to substitute it. Less abstract in a way. Unlike many other, themes, that are loose concepts connecting multiple songs, the meaning of Don't Forget is more direct than something like, I don't know, fucking Gaster's theme. Though it does have some layer of mystery that will be fully hard to unpack until, well, the full game is released. As with most things related to Deltarune, all me and anyone else in the fanbase can do is guess the completed puzzle with only a handful of pieces, most of which, unfortunately, don't go together. This one is a tad more subtle than the others at first, but it quickly becomes noticeable. Much like Beginning, this is one of the first tracks to show up in a chapter, and wouldn't you know it, this track plays on the title screen, and wow, it shows Chris and their friends in the dark looking at a fountain. I'm with you in the dark, yeah, you know the drill by now. The first 20 or so times I heard this song, I never even noticed the leitmotif. When I saw the Deltarune wiki and some other people say it was in this track, I was incredibly confused. I literally had to pull up sheet music for both Don't Forget and The Dark Truth, then compare them side by side to understand where it was supposed to be. And Toby snuck it right in at the end because of course he did. He's done this for a good handful of the other songs on the soundtrack after all. Moving past that, the way that it's used here at first glance clashes with how the leitmotif has been used in the past until you look a bit closer. Although it's stuck at the end, the leitmotif has a string of high-pitched notes that draw attention to themselves amongst the lower notes that mostly play throughout the song. This song focuses around a very heavy topic, but even so, these higher notes plucking out the leitmotif show that there perhaps is some kind of glimmer of hope. Perhaps the Lightners will stand a chance and will not be inevitably doomed into an eternal darkness. Perhaps there is still someone that can be with them in the dark. This is just the song the leitmotif is based on and then put into a remix. And of course, it goes extremely hard. This track is unsurprisingly unlikely to have any significant lore relevance. Toby seems quite favorable towards this leitmotif, seeing as how many goddamn times he put it in the soundtrack, and it being in this particular song is probably a little fun wordplay on the line "I'm with you in the dark," since, well, Toby's self-insert dog character is right there in front of you on a dark screen. Average Toby Fox meta joke. Though the leitmotif pops up a couple times, it only begins, then trails off into something else before restarting, making it a lot more subtle in the way it's presented. Unfortunately, there's not much we can learn from this track other than a reinforcement of how Hometown's leitmotif will still be paired with the Don't Forget leitmotif in the future, continuing the pattern built so far. And with that, we're done. 15 tracks analyzed from chapters 1, 2, and possibly from chapter 4. So, what now, you might be wondering? We've looked through nearly 20 tracks from Deltarune and tried to figure out what greater significance it could all possibly mean, and, well, there has been something I've been conveniently leaving out of the breakdown. Leitmotifs tend to center around places, events, and more often than not, people. All the places with this theme have some connections to each other, but not enough for them to all be tied together for some reason with a string of notes. You could argue that the Don't Forget leitmotif is associated with the normal routes, since a bulk of the Snowgrave route songs don't actually feature it. But I don't think that's quite it. That only leaves us with a person this could be centering around. And undeniably, that's Chris. We see this leitmotif in places that are incredibly important to them, such as their hometown, their school, and their own home. It plays at the beginning of their story, when they harness their power to seal the fountains, and when they make friends, when their unclear past potentially overlaps with Gaster, when parts of their story come to a close, and so much more. While Don't Forget is the main leitmotif of the game, I'd arguably say that this is also Chris's theme, in a sense. We are following their story as they go through fantastical places with their friends right by their side, even when the situations they go through become difficult. So it would only be right if the theme that follows them is actually theirs, right? I think that this leitmotif can tell us about the future is that whenever you hear this leitmotif in the game, Chris's presence isn't too far behind. So keep your ears open, because the game might give us clues as to what we can learn more about Chris. Thank you for watching.